the Declaration of Independence. It says that computations clearly show that on the day of the Declaration of Independence was agreed in Philadelphia, the sun was on Sirius again. Of course, that's a coincidence, right? Now, Philadelphia, the very word Delphi, Phila meaning love of, Delphi, wisdom. There's a whole concept there going back to the oracle at Delphi. And then we have a statement that says that the Mason who first signed the Declaration of Independence would have been aware of the particular significance of July 4th as a cosmic event. The day was the second in the so-called dog days, which begin on July 3rd. So even the signing of the Declaration of Independence one day before, or even the day of birth of America, what are the dog days? Well, that is because, again, they refer to the rising of the star Sirius. So we're only touching on something here, and yet we've already got tremendous significance. And you'll find obelisks and domes and ovals all over the world, very close to observatories that have to do with the stars. These images are all over the place. Another concept coming out of Freemasonry is the idea of the Royal Arch. And of course, that's why you have arches in all the main cities of the world. And in fact, people may have noticed it in front of a civic building or a United Nations building or what have you. You'll see the symbol of 3 flags. You know, 3 flagpoles. That seemingly innocuous symbol there of 3 flagpoles goes back to Egypt again, because their hieroglyphic of 3 flags actually meant neter, which was the word for the gods. So that's why you find it in front of government buildings, because often the people in the government buildings think of themselves literally as the new gods or the controllers. In a previous show that I was on with you, we pointed out the occult significance of the dollar sign, which is really, of course, a cleverly designed Isis.
Pushed together.
Pushed together. And of course, if you look at the symbol of Isis, the rods and the serpent, or sorry, the S is the serpent, and the 2 vertical lines, seen another way, really represent the caduceus of Hermes, which the medical profession are using. You see, there's a similarity there. Many scholars have been talking about the symbolism on the $1 bill. And there is a tremendous symbolism on it. Instead of trying to earn one might want to take one out and just look at it and study one and ask yourself a question of what kind of symbolism is on it and why is an Egyptian pyramid and so on a dollar bill. And we have a very famous symbol of the eagle. And the eagle, I mean, the symbolism that goes into this is just incredibly deep, and it's beyond the scope of this presentation, but the eagle is the symbol of America because it has to do with the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio is a very large area of sky. It has 30 degrees in it, like all the signs, but there's many constellations there, and the most important one to the ancient people that actually used to symbolize Scorpio in ancient times, not anymore, was the sign of Aquila, the eagle. If you open a book on the planispheres, you will see a sign, a constellation called Aquila the eagle. And Scorpio, as astrologers know, has to do with power and money. And that's why it is the symbol of America, and that's why it's on a dollar bill.
And we note the 13 blue stars and within the circle. And
it also has 13 little berries in the leaves, 13 leaves, 13 lines, 13 tail feathers, 13 arrows. The symbol of 13, again, because it has to do with the precinct, the 13th sign of the zodiac, which occultists know all about. The 13 levels of the pyramid and the eye above it. Because the Freemasons that I'm talking about are not what we call the speculative Freemasons who come in generally from ordinary professions, well-meaning, charitable people. It's not those Freemasons that I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about the bloodline Freemasons who are by bloodline connected to these oligarchical forces coming out of the ancient world. And that's in fact why the 14th level of the pyramid is divided from the pyramid, to show that there's a difference between the accepted or speculative Freemasons, who are ordinary people like you and I, and then you have these power-mongering oligarchs who they think of themselves as being separate. It is these individuals that are responsible for the bringing in of occult symbols of this magnitude, you see.
What does that say at the bottom there? Novus Ordo?
Ordo Seclorum is New Order of the Worlds, or the New World Order. That term comes from the Romans, who believed that they were bringing a new order to the world. And there's much talk today, again, about why this euphemism has been used in politics. But again, that's outside the scope of this present presentation. What it really has to do with is the fact that there was an old world order and a new world order. That when America was founded, it was considered that there was a separation now from what we call the land of the old world structure, financially and economically and religiously, and America signaled a new world order. And the pyramid, again, you see, is a signal a very important symbol with the eye in it, the eye on the pyramid. And this is like a zodiac circle, the seal of the United States. Circles like this often represented a magical circle or magical precinct, you see, or the zodiac itself.
With 13 letters on the
Yes.
inner track.
Indeed, yes. Charles Taze Russell, for instance, people who think this is all way beyond anything that they will ever become exposed to. That is not true, because individuals in America, famous people, Charles Taze Russell, who's considered the head of the Mormon Church, was buried under an Illuminati pyramid with Freemasonic symbols. He was a Freemason. Most of the religions of the world are actually controlled by Freemasonry or have some connection to it, to some secret society. Here again, for within a year of Washington's death, it was recognized that the great man would most fittingly be memorialized by means of a massive pyramid. In the years following the Revolution, the Masonic fraternities held ceremonial layings for such new enterprises as bridges, locks, universities, government buildings, state houses, memorials, and even churches. Such buildings were aligned with the stars and with the spiritual beings who ruled the stars. Now that's an interesting statement. Although a survey of the foundation charts used in the early phase of the building of Washington, D.C. reveals that the importance of astrology, and indeed confirms beyond doubt that astrology played an important role in the early Masonic rites, the rationale of astrology was rarely discussed openly, even in Masonic documents. And then he continues to say, knowledge of the stars, insofar as they were understood in Masonic circles, was preserved as secrets best left to those with specialist knowledge of such things. That basically means that it was concealed from the ordinary people by the historians because it was very secret, and they didn't want to expose that this stuff was going on behind the scenes.
And kept it also from regular Freemasons.
Right, absolutely. The tradition, and why? What would be the point of doing all this, going to this, these millions of dollars of expense? Well, he suggests here that the tradition of a godlike tutelary city ruler was much older than this idea of planetary intelligences. The ancient records indicate that it was a practice in former ages for the mystery centers that directed civilization to hand out newly founded cities to the care of specific spiritual beings. So by aligning things to certain stars, they were absolutely making the cities into ritual sites. So what we have to understand, and what is key, which a point that I'd like to bring out every time I talk on this, is that a city is a ritual site. When you see a magician standing within a circle in these old images of the magician within his circle, within his precinct, we are in one by being inside a city which is designed according to these layouts with this stellar and sidereal symbolism. Whether you know it or not, you are participating in a ritual that you don't know exists. So certain assassinations, certain events that take place, ceremonies, erections of this, openings of that, it is part of a much greater ritual that we are not privy to. That's a very important point. And he says here again, the practice of assigning places to the rule of specific zodiological signs, and thus in medieval times to spiritual beings, is very ancient and has been extended to modern times. Since the discovery of America, we are able to trace most of the sources for the zodiological rulerships ascribed to the cities of the United States. So now people have proven that each city in America can in fact be traced to its divine overlord, or its symbolic, tutelary spirit. Perhaps it is sufficient that we recognize as true the medieval arcane notion that such beings could be invited to participate in the life of a city by means of the spiritual art of astrology. Now this is from the works of the Founding Fathers. More down to earth, we have this idea of the Statue of Liberty. People have recognized this. This picture doesn't show it, but the Statue of Liberty actually stands on a peculiar eight-pointed star. Even the pedestal which the statue sits on is very curious. But for now, I just want to bring out 2 points. One is the headdress. This, even though the Liberty statue is Grecian in decoration, the goddess that it is showing is not Grecian or French. It is Egyptian. The goddess on the right there is actually called Sechet, and we get our number 7 from her. And the 7 crowns, or the 7 rays, is Egyptian. And then the thing that she's holding there is the flame of liberty, they say. Well, that is Grecian, and actually comes from an object called the palladium. And this was passed on from one dying civilization to a new one. So when we see the Statue of Liberty holding the flame of the new world, there's a very great significance as to why that is. And we find that symbol of the flame on gas stations and many other areas. The President Kennedy's tomb, I believe, has one of these palladiums, and people will see it commonly. One of the most beloved symbols of Freemasonry is the compass and the set, or the square. Where does that come from? It is a symbol of the meeting of the earth god and the sky goddess. And the phallus, or the male member of the earth god, is the obelisk, and the overarching night sky, that is the symbol behind the compass and the G. And G in the middle represents generation. Now this has many, many symbols. It also means geometry, of course, but it has to do with a symbol of the coming together of the male and the female, the god of the earth and the goddess of the sky, going way back to Egypt.